good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you, and welcome. I'm David Bell, and I'm here co-hosting this morning's, or this afternoon's, or this evening's event, depending on where you're joining us. Welcome to all our friends joining us from the UK, maybe across Europe, across the Middle East, and into the Far East, and maybe we're also reaching North Africa, South Africa, maybe North America. But thank you very much for joining us. Another exciting show here today. We've got a fantastic guest who we're going to introduce to you very soon. But by my side, as always, Professor Alan Barrell. Good morning, Alan. Welcome again. Lovely to see you. Looking young and healthy as always.
Oh, thank you. Well, I don't know about young. I'm probably the oldest person on the call, but I'm keeping my spirits up, you know. Age cannot be reversed, but it can be dealt with, and I'm doing my best.
Well, you're looking very vibrant today, Alan. Now, Alan, we've got a very special guest, someone you've known for several decades. So I'm going to kind of hand across to you to welcome our guest this morning. And no doubt you've got a few little secrets and stories that we can unravel with our
Thank you, David, and thank you for organising as usual. And thank you all for joining. It's wonderful for me to be with you on these webinars. And yes, John is a very, very special guest, a very special person in my life and in the life of many people, a lot of young people, as you're going to hear when you hear his story. And I've known John, it must be 25 or 30 years, and we've worked together on a particular charity that was a wonderful charity, really, the Papworth Trust, in a village that in a sort of slightly earlier era provided a lot of employment for people with disability that couldn't easily find employment in any other ways. But John did much more than that, and you'll hear an enormous amount about what he's been doing. He's a great sportsman, and his whole business that he runs to bring together people with full ability and disability. His whole number of years has been spent doing every sport you can think about. And of course, you can see that John has certain challenges that you and I don't have. And his nether half is similar. So unfortunately, he's not as fully abled as you and me, but he's mentally probably superior than all of us put together, because he's got a law degree, he's got an MBA, he's run businesses, he's been a lawyer, he's been in investment and all kinds of things. And he's done some things that some people would feel rather risky and foolhardy, like jumping off high diving boards, Olympic style, which he told me was a bit scary without any arms and legs. And I can imagine, because it'd be scary for me, you'd never get me up there. So anyway, John, it's great to see you here. And you know, when one thinks of the challenges that you've faced, and you can talk about those, and you talk about them with great humility. And John, by the way, I happen also to know his dear wife, who's a wonderful lady, who's a financial expert. I haven't met his kids lately, but they're all grown up now. Anyway, John, why don't you say a little bit more about yourself, and then we can get into a discussion. As you know, we don't have scripts here. We're all informal, and we want to learn about each other. And I want you all out there to hear this story of John Willis and what he's done, what he's doing, and what he's still planning to do into the future, because it's not only heartwarming, it's very important in terms of society and the evolution of communities. So, John, your chance to speak.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, David. And hello, everybody. I was born without hands and without feet. My legs finish at the knee, so I don't actually have a knee. I just have the upper leg, and I wear prosthetic legs, and I walk around on them. When I was born, my mother came up with a phrase when fairly young. She said to me, she told me, there's no such word as can't. And her attitude was very much, you can do whatever you want to do, John. Now, I go into lots of schools, and I've changed that. I do believe there is a word can't, and all of us say it internally, if not externally. I can't do that. I can't be bothered. I can't. And I've changed it and I say, I can't do it yet. And it's good to pause and to remind yourself that you can do it if you really want to do it, and you're prepared to work out how to do it and to work around all the different ways you can do it. Certain things are just not worth the time. I actually once learnt I challenged myself to eat with chopsticks, and after eating one piece of chicken, I said, done it, got that t-shirt, and I'm not going to bother again because a fork and a spoon are much, much easier for me. So, so there are times when you have to be pragmatic about it. But I think it's a really good phrase for life. I can't do it yet. And we actually had one class one time, a teacher came to me having heard this in the assembly at the beginning of the day, and she said, we had an I can't do it moment later on this afternoon, John. In class, one boy said about a sum, I can't do it, miss. And the whole of the class shouted out, yet. So he was encouraged to have another go. Part of one of the funniest things in retrospect was I was taken out of school here in the UK, nursery school. It was an average nursery school by the inspectors, who said, John can't be here, he needs to be in a special school. And I was taken off to a special school back in the 1960s, and I was taught in that school how to be disabled, and that was all. And my father went in, and this is the funny bit. He actually said something kind about me. The only time in his life that he talked to me about it, he said to the head teacher, how many O levels, and I'm showing my age, O levels, not GCSEs, so 16-year certificates. How many O levels is John going to take? And the head teacher said, don't be ridiculous, Mr. Willis. None of our pupils take O levels and don't have unrealistic ambitions. And my father said, but John's got a brain, why can't he use it? And he told him in no uncertain terms that that was not going to happen in his school. None of his pupils could do that. So my parents took me out of that system, and I was privately educated. As it was, I managed to get to Cambridge University and become a lawyer. And thanks to what Alan said earlier, I've had a reasonable career. So it does go to show that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Just because I didn't have hands or feet does not mean that I couldn't think. And fortunately, special needs schools have moved on massively. And that's not to say that I haven't had the challenges. When being a lawyer, it was at times quite amusing, quite funny, but I was a litigator, first of all, a banking litigator and then a property litigator. That's a solicitor who specializes in lawsuits around banking and then property. And I did have one case which I thought would be quite amusing to repeat. It wasn't a major application in front of the junior judge. They're called masters. And you go in with your opposite number. I can't even remember whether I was acting for the plaintiff or the defendant. And we were actually asking for more time to serve a document. And you go in groups of 6 or 8, and me and my opponent were the last in the group. And one by one, these couples went up and argued their silly little claim in front of the junior judge. And finally, it was our turn. And I jumped off my chair, walked forward, and he's sitting at a desk behind a dais so he was slumped in his chair, so he couldn't see over the top of his desk. And whose application is next? And I said, mine, master. He said, who said that? And I said, me, master. Who's it? Who is it? Talk up. Where are you? Where are you? And I went round the side of the desk, and he said, oh, it's you. And I looked at my opponent, who shook his head and proverbially waved the white flag because he knew that he'd lost the application there and then. So there are advantages at times to having a disability. Lots and lots of. So why don't you ask me some questions, Alan, so that I can take forward what you want to look at.
I mean, John, when we you might like to talk a little bit about the time we worked very, very closely together, where I probably saw you almost every other week. Having been a lawyer, you got involved with this particular charity, Papworth Trust, which is based in a village, which was originally a village designed for people with tuberculosis in earlier times. So it was a special place before antibiotics, founded by a man called Barrell Jones, a doctor. And the theory then was all you needed was good fresh air for dealing with these poor people. And they were moved out with their families to one place. It was a way of dealing with things that really was bound eventually to inevitably to not succeed, because if you form ghettos, then the ethos within them becomes very, very constrained. And John was on the board with me of the group of people we ran an electronics company, we had the leather goods company, we had a luggage company, we had all printing company and so on. But that time changed because the people in those companies really didn't want to be altogether disabled. They wanted to be in a more normal community. And John was all part of that. And then what we did was, because we sort of owned the village, and we wanted to raise more money initially for the charity. And John moved out into a new charity, which was something quite unusual, John, wasn't it, really? The Barrell Jones Foundation, with a view to developing the village and work to sell a lot of the land for developing it into a more normal village with new housing. And that was quite a challenge, John, wasn't it, really? That's when we did most of our work together.
Yes, so there were two factors. One, the project to redevelop the village, which was necessary to bring in new blood, was distracting the officers of the Papworth Trust, the main charity, from their day jobs. And the trustees realised that they needed a separate entity to actually do that, so that it wouldn't distract from the day job, and which was looking after and helping and developing disabled people. So it was quite funny in the sense that I was given a wonderful room in the old hall at Papworth, which was the old library. I was given a table, a chair, a rug, which was really important because without feet, I sat on the chair, and because of the camber of the room, I would have slid down to the one window. So we had to have a rug so that I didn't go flying off. But I was also given £1.7 million and the land around the village. When I left, the charity was worth £35 million, and it's now worth even more. And we had redeveloped the village, so a huge success. The task of bringing in new people, we did want to we had to make sure that disabled people who did live there and who had made their lives there, quite a number were born there. There were quite a number of descendants from the original people who'd come for TB. They needed to have accessible spaces. So one of the things that the design that Sir Pendrell Barrell Jones came up with TB being caught through the air, was he wanted to keep people apart. So the housing that he built actually had fabulous verandas on the back, but they faced away from each other. So very few people in the village could actually socialize. So it didn't have a village centre. There was nothing like that. So one of the things that we did was knock down the factories. And in order to do that, we had to build a new business park. So the first thing we did was build a new business park, move those factories that we invited to move to the business park, knock down the old factories, developed part of it as a village centre. And one of my proudest things is I managed to persuade the library service to put in a new village library into Papworth. And one of my favourite things that I ever saw was a string of computers along one wall, and people in front of it using these computers. And one was an older person, one was a mum, and there were some disabled people and some kids. And it was just natural that everybody should do it together, and everybody was back in 20 odd years ago, people were helping each other because nobody really knew how to use computers, and they were all helping each other, which I found fabulous, regardless of whether they were disabled or not.
And you also set up a very nice restaurant and bar.
Yeah, there was also a vet, a shop, a cafe, and a bar. So we brought in a lot. The other thing that I also found really interesting was two people who'd lived in the village all their lives, who lived next door to each other. I saw them in the library and they were chatting, and they said this is only the third time we've ever talked to each other. Because if you don't have communal safe spaces, it's very difficult to meet people. And I think that's a really interesting lesson for all communities. So people do like meeting people. That's why I think Zoom calls and the rest of it are great starting points for people to meet. So anyway, I was there for 12 years, and we redeveloped the village centre. And one of the mantras was to add value to the external parts. And that made, with a village centre, it made the land on the edge of the village that much more valuable. And when we ended up selling the land, the last lot went for 28 million because of the work that we had put in before. And that was, well, there was a lesson in there. I won't say who it was, but there was a chief exec who wanted to sell that land earlier in the cycle, and it would have got £5 million. So there is real danger in taking money too soon and cashing in. So it was great, and therefore I know now that the Papworth Trust gets £1 million plus every year from the foundation, which covers an awful lot of overheads and stuff that is so difficult for charities to raise money for.
Let me remind everyone that what John's telling you sounds like it was all straightforward. But believe me, especially in the UK, if you're dealing with planning permission, land use, builders, contractors, local government, it's an absolute nightmare, and it's zoological gardens of intrigue and difficulty. And it takes enormous attention to detail and patience, and sometimes toughness to make anything happen at all in certain parts of our country. I'm sorry to say that, but it is the reality, isn't it? Not in my backyard. Anything you want to do, there's a host of people don't want it. And John had to work his way through all that. And as he said, he had a desk and a computer and a rug, a bit of part-time administrative help. And that's all you had, John, apart from people like me, your board, who were supporting you. It was kind of the Lone Ranger, weren't you?
I did look around the room once when I was telephoned and somebody said, "Who's in charge of your IT?" And I suddenly realized it was me. There was a love, anybody who knows the film Life of Brian, there was an absolutely lovely moment when I was at a parish meeting where somebody said, "What has the Varrier Jones Foundation ever done for us?" And I said, "What about the library?" They said, "Apart from the library." "What about the shops?" "Well, apart from the shop." "What about the vets?" "Well, I don't like vets because I don't have an animal."
I just want to pop this up on the screen to tell you, John, your many people's inspirations, your stories are brilliant. So as people will know, this is live. It's unscripted, as Alan mentioned at the beginning. We're just having great conversation, learning about various steps in John's journey. If you want to introduce yourself in the comments, please do pop a message in there. Just say hello. Tell us where you're from. That's always good to know where our audience are tuning in from. And this is recorded. So if you do join halfway through and you think, what have I missed? Well, the good news is you can pick it up on catch up and jump back in any point throughout this morning's conversation. John, this is inspirational, as Taoyu's put there. Absolutely. I've got a question. It's around disabilities. As you pointed out at the beginning, you are limited from the arms downwards and from the knees or just above the knees. And I imagine that does bring its own challenges in life. I'm going to assumption here, but I want to hear from you that has it become easier as we've become a more modern society, as we've gone through the years? What are the challenges that you find in everyday life currently? Out in the real world. So if you go into a shopping centre, if you're trying to find accessible toilets, what is it like out there for someone that has restrictive movement and stuff like that?
Well, I'm very fortunate, so because I don't have restrictive movements and I can get up and down steps. I'm not a Dalek. But I do, notice, the other day it was. So I parked in a disabled space at a garage, and there was a wonderful disabled space leading straight onto a pavement, at which the end of was a drop curb. Well, I mean, that is just crass. It is so stupid. Why do you've actually had the brain power to actually work out we need a disabled space, then make it accessible. That sort of thing really gets me cross, because people have thought about it and not thought from the right direction. And it's not as if everybody knows somebody who could give you the answer. That's where I get really annoyed. What else? I mean, increasingly, so I know of a story in London where to get to a particular station, you have to take 2 changes because otherwise you can't get off the train so that's another one. I think it is way, way better than it was when I was growing up. The technology has improved. I now have prosthetic legs which actually have shock absorbers in, which I was asking for 25 years. Sadly, it was the Iraq War that actually prompted that, because suddenly the American military decided to invest in those sort of technology. The computers have both a benefit and a disbenefit. It is true that it allows people like me and others to interact with people all around the world without moving, and you can actually set up your life to be not disabled. I always say it is the environment that is disabling, not the person who is disabled. And therefore, if you can wear a headset or use a mouse in a particular way, most technology is accessible for a lot of people in a way that it wasn't. The downside is that virtually every job out there now requires a standard of understanding that it didn't need before. So cleaning jobs, you need to be able to read and understand quite technical stuff. There is a professor who spotted this trend. There've been, when you had villages and only villages were very good at finding occupation for the disadvantaged, disabled people within their community. Industrial society said everybody has to be able to do this, so people were thrown on a heap. The computer age has split society, so if you can use a computer and have got the comprehension to understand, then you are going to be advantaged. If you do not, you can no longer do an awful lot of useful jobs that might be menial to some people, but are really powerful, productive parts of society. The one bit I would take issue with you, Alan, in relation to the Papworth Trust Industries, for about 80% of the people in those industries, they were dreadful places because they were demeaning and patronizing and held people back from mainstream employment. For about 20%, they were fantastic because that's all they could do, and they were part of something bigger than themselves, and they weren't doing nothing. So it's actually finding ways of how do we engage disabled and non-disabled people, but as AI takes over, in activities that are meaningful, which are not, and get paid for doing. I think it's a really interesting challenge over the next 25 years.
Yeah, and John, you and I were part of the process when Papworth was transformed and the ghetto-like homes were shut down and new facilities were developed where disabled people were enabled to live with normally abled people in places that were properly designed to take account, as you say, the environment was made such that they were no different, in fact, in what they could do in their own apartments than others. And that was a really interesting period when things were happening in a quite significant way. And by the way, everybody, John, by the way, drives his car better than I could drive a car. You've driven for years, haven't you, John?
Yes,
no problem driving around.
Actually, one of the things I was going to say to David was the biggest challenge is the people's assumptions. I was talking about my father earlier. My father assumed that I would never drive. And when your father assumes something like that, it was very difficult for me to naysay that assumption. And then my very clever friends at Cambridge University who were doing engineering, they came to the same assumption. It turns out that it's completely bogus. And when I was 35, a wonderful lady showed me that she could adapt. She was a specialist instructor and she could adapt her car. I could control it, and off we went. So I've got raised pedals, a steering cone, a bit like a knob, but the other way around. So it's a bit like a metal ice cream cone, which I put my right paw in. For the steering cone, and an extended gear lever. I mean, it basically only has to go reverse and drive. And off I go. And I use pedals. The right is for brake. One of the things I think we should bring in is that all able-bodied drivers should have a test at which leg is the stronger leg, and that should be the brake pedal. I don't understand why we have this concept of, so if I've got it, everybody else makes sense. You should be able to push down on your brake faster. And I wonder whether that would actually save accidents. There's always ways of learning.
Yeah, John.
But no, not just that. I've learnt with all sorts of gadgets to get myself dressed, to get trousers on was the big one. How do I pull up the zip before I do up the button? Because I can't hold the two bits together, and I have a hook that pulls up the trouser zip, and that was the solution to a problem. And
I think, John, you told us that the first hook you made to pull up your zip on your trousers, you made from a coat hanger.
Oh yes, definitely.
Yeah, a metal coat hanger.
Innovation for you see.
That's innovation. John,
so I'm a great believer that...
Let's move on a bit to this, the later period of your career and journey, this exciting company that you formed. And I've known John since he started Power2Inspire, and I'd like him to say something about that. And part of that development was spent, and this is interesting for people to know, it was a period where you spent a bit of time in a rather special innovation center, the Future Business Center, which specialized in what we would call impact or social enterprise companies, which has done very well. You move through that phase and now you're independent. But it would be great to hear about what it was that got you started with Power2Inspire, and something about how you've done it. And I can't resist hearing a bit more about that period when you did all the Olympic,
Okay.
each one of the Olympic sports, you did them all.
So the first start was a friend of mine called Tim Martin who challenged me. Oh, and it took him 5 years to persuade me to do it. He wanted to do an able-bodied triathlon relay with me doing the swim, and he said, I'll do the bike ride and we'll get somebody to do the run. In the end, we did it at Eton Dorney Rowing Lake. My goal was to beat an hour for 1,500 meters in open water. I did it in 52 minutes, 23 seconds. Not that I'm competitive. He did the bike ride in a reasonable time, and we got in a friend of his who did the 10K run in 36 minutes, which is very fast. Our goal was not to come last. We came 18th out of 27. And we had a blast, and it showed to me that disabled people could have really good time doing sport together with non-disabled people, and you could make it competitive. And I raised £20,000, and I tried to find a way of putting that money out there. And I won't go into the boring details, but in the end, my wife said, why don't you set up your own charity? Because I couldn't find a charity that did genuinely inclusive sport. And what I mean by that is not disabled people doing the sport with others watching. I like it where everybody's doing it together. And so we were born in 2013, and 2014, I did a small next challenge of, we called it the 50-50-100, where I did 50 1,000 meter swims in 50 different pools around the country in 100 days, which was quite tiring. And then, as Alan said, the big one was in 2015, 2016, when I did John's Road to Rio. Some people thought that I was going to be a Paralympian, but I'm not, nowhere near a Paralympian. But I did do all 34 Olympic and Paralympic sports, including diving off a 3-meter high diving board, head first without hands to break the fall, riding on a horse without legs, which is really quite scary because you don't actually grip, you just balance. What else? Taekwondo. I do not recommend when you're my height, which is shorter, which is the perfect height to be kicked in the head. Boxing without long arms is got to be defensive and only defensive. But I did love tennis. I had a tennis racket made and I still play tennis. And my very first game of tennis was actually with Dylan Olcott, who's a triple Paralympic gold medalist in quad wheelchair tennis. And it was just fantastic. A bit like non-disabled people playing their first game with Roger Federer or Serena Williams. And what else did I do? I played golf, football, rugby. I did do synchronized swimming. What's not to like with synchronized swimming when I was able to join in with a group of 8 girls? That was great fun. So we raised quite a lot of money through that. And the last challenge I did was almost 2 years ago. I did the 108 challenge where I kayaked down the Thames 108 miles with somebody else. So I had 21 different partners and we did 108 miles in 8 days, and had a special paddle made and I can paddle like so. And we did it. Yeah. And why do we do all this? That's the point that Alan's getting to. We do a thing called Powerhouse Games, where we bring disabled and non-disabled people together to play sport in an inclusive way. We play such games as boccia, sitting volleyball. Boccia is a bit like bowls. It's a Paralympic sport. Goalball, where you're blindfolded, like in the Paralympics again. Curling, we play new age curling, which is with ball bearings under the stones rather than on the ice. Inclusive games, which are great fun. Our mantra is to have fun and no one is left on the bench. We get 6 groups of people to come together, usually university students, 3 schools, and a corporate volunteer. And we're always looking for corporate volunteers to come along. And what do people get? They get giving back to the community, having fun, helping others to enjoy themselves. And it is just a delight. We did one yesterday, and Castle Special School, that's a school in Cambridge designed for people with special needs. They brought their most disadvantaged, disabled kids, some of whom didn't really participate much, but getting them out and getting them to the University Sports Centre, as their teacher in charge of them said, nobody else will have us, John. And the university students helped and were brilliantly kind and allowed them to enjoy the sports in a way that they wanted to enjoy them. And one lad hardly joined in, but absolutely loved playing boccia and brought a smile to everybody in his team's faces and the opponents. They just loved, just because he was really challenged, and yet he was there able to join in. It was fantastic. And that's what we do. And I'm a volunteer, and I have been for 12 years. And we desperately need other volunteers to come along and help. We need corporates to help join and support their staff to volunteer at our events. We need students like at Anglia Ruskin University to come along and say that they want to be part of this, so that we can attract more people. Last year we did 30 of these powerhouse games around the country. We've been to Cambridge, Oxford, Durham, Worcester, Warwick, Roehampton, Kent, all around the country. And this year we're targeting 40 powerhouse games. And considering that only a couple of years ago we did 11, so it's growing very fast because there is huge demand. And the smiles you see, not just on the faces of the disabled kids. And one said last term, this has been the best day of my life. But it's also the joy that it gives the students, corporate partners, and also the other schools. We get an independent school and a state school to come along as well. The kids learn so much about communication, about working with disadvantaged people, helping, teamwork, leadership. There's just so much goes on. They come in timid and they leave joyful. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing.
The way that these young people have their confidence built is such a big, big thing. And is it just you, John? You've got at least one person working with you now, haven't you?
We have one employee who works 4 days a week because that's all we can afford. We're always looking for support, fundraising efforts to help us. We want to be known by more people, so we want help in fundraising, IT, PR, data. If there's anybody out there who likes to manipulate data and evaluate it, we've got lots of data. We just don't have the resources to demonstrate how wonderful it is. We've had over 5,000 people come to our games, which is fantastic. And we just want help and come and join the fun, because that's the other thing. It's really good fun.
Yeah. Don't take my word for it, John. You're inspirational, because the comments are coming in. What a wise person you are, John. Your life and experience is on legend.
Yeah, there's a message on screen here. Now, Zoe, I had lunch with Zoe last week. I met her. She's one of the PhD students that my friend Jake Wimin Lee has brought here from China. She'll be here for a year. And the idea is that these PhDs, that we got 3 of them now from China at ARU, they have to be entrepreneurial. They're part of Gary Packham's entrepreneurial thing. Now, it might be Zoe's listening to this, John. She may have heard you say something about all the data you've got and what that might mean if it were put into some sort of shape that could be developed into a paper that could get published, couldn't it?
Yeah.
And not only Zoe, but I know others of the students that are there. So, Zoe, you might like to think about whether you feel that there's something of a research study here. I know you're working with other groups in ARU, and make good use of your year here and get yourself a good publication on the impact of whatever it is you want to define John has been doing with Power2Inspire. It's all about inclusivity and community and people and leadership and followership and confidence building. And I'm sure I could find a journal that might be interested in publishing something about this. But anyway, so Zoe, I'm so pleased you could attend, and she told me she would. And it is great. That's the kind of communication that we really want to have.
Yeah.
David, you probably will meet
there either. More comments coming in.
we got a message here from Beijing, John.
Yeah, so thanks for the invitation, John. Your deeds.
Yeah, Django and Echo. I met them when they were here. They were students in the same class. They eventually got together and then they got married, and they're both masters in finance. And I'm hoping that Django is going to come here one of these days and do the postgraduate diploma in entrepreneurship. We've been talking about it, but obviously quite a big step for a young man from Beijing. But I've been in touch with them now for 3 years. And I think that this kind of community and responsive activity of people is why David and I are so excited about these webinars, how they bring people together and they further interest amongst people. So thank you for coming on. Any more questions? Any more? Anyone up in the north want to say something?
Alan, I've got a couple of points that so it's not just about the disabled and non-disabled people meeting each other. We had a wonderful example of a school child from a mainstream school who wouldn't join in PE back at school. Due to the fantastic efforts of the university students, she joined in at one of our games and her confidence blossomed within the morning. Another one, which was I just think is hilarious, was one of the university students said about meeting a corporate volunteer from an accountancy firm, said to me afterwards, "But I didn't realize that accountants could be human," which I thought was hilarious. And another one, an independent school boy, and that's private school, and a state school boy were in the same team, and they had their backs to each other at the first round. Second round, they were playing quick cricket, a very strange English game, but based on cricket, and they both loved cricket. And suddenly they were nattering away, and by the end they'd become best friends and had exchanged details to get in contact afterwards. So it breaks down barriers across the board. It's not just about disabled and non-disabled. It's just it's
you're
older,
right.
younger.
You make that point very well. I'm really pleased you have, John. Very, very important. Is anyone else out there want to pose a question?
Why don't we have an Anglia Ruskin University Powerhouse Games? We've had one down in Chelmsford, but it would be great to have one in Cambridge.
Did you say you have done one at ARU?
Yes, in Chelmsford.
Chelmsford. But you'd like to do one in Cambridge?
Yes.
So we've got a question. Yeah, so we can use our powers of persuasion, maybe to see how we can get ARU, how we can get. Well, yeah, we can go to China. We can come to you wherever you are. We are mobile and able. But we do have a question here. John, may I ask if you think the policies and facilities of a region or company will affect the employment choices of people with disabilities? Do you have any suggestions regarding the relevant policies? I'll leave that question on there so you can dissect it a little bit. Is that something you can give us a bit of a response around there, John?
I think the challenge there is what are the assumptions behind those policies and facilities? There are parts of the world where people with disabilities are marginalized because there is fear and a lack of understanding. And what I would suggest is that we need to tackle that before the policies and facilities will be changed, because people put those because they're terrified. That's one of the great things about our Powerhouse Games is people come up to me and say, what do I say? What do I say to these kids who are disabled? I said, speak to them as you would your neighbor, somebody new, some employee, whatever. They're just people. And you will find out that there are good disabled people and not so good disabled people you like and people you don't quite like, but treat them as people and with respect and understanding. One of the things that I find fascinating is there is some studies now that a significant number of entrepreneurs and heads of the FTSE and other top companies, FTSE 100 and the Dow Jones Index top companies, have autism to some extent. So are they all disabled? They would hate the idea that they were disabled, but actually they're just differently abled and therefore they are disabled. So, we've got to get rid of the prejudice. I think it's the prejudice behind the premise of that question that needs challenging first. You're never going to attack the policies until we've got rid of the prejudice.
Yeah, I think, John, the question, because it comes from Zoe, it relates to the stage of attitudes to disability that in China are different than they even are here yet. And Zoe, there's another lady online, I hope she'll say she's online, called Tao Yu, who is from China but living and working in the UK, who is working with John and me to try and set up a company that will deal with special needs education and make it much more accessible in China.
Look at this, Alan. So this is magic because you've already reached out. I would like to talk to Zoe too and could work inclusivity in China. So
yes, Tao's come on.
Happens, doesn't it? This is what's brilliant about these conversations we're having here with John and all our other amazing guests, that it's not just about what we're talking about, it's about the connections and relationships that get developed and built as well. So Tao Yu, Zoe, get communicating. You're both communicating already on LinkedIn. Connect yourselves. Find an opportunity to follow up and make that introduction more meaningful. And I'm sure both Alan and John can assist with that.
So. Yeah, and I think, David, at a later stage, we might invite Tao to join one of these webinars because she's in the process of developing her business. She's based in Cambridge. She's going to go back to China for the new year, but she'll be back here. And I'm very impressed with her inspiration and resolution. And I've got other people who are not online today who are also interested in working with her to see what we can do, Zoe, to influence policies and investment in China itself in these issues of people working together in the way that John has been describing today.
We're running out of time rapidly. We've already gone over slightly, so I think we should try and conclude and start to wrap up today's amazing conversation with John. I'm going to let you kind of wrap everything up, Alan, but I just want to say, John, it's been amazing to meet you. My first opportunity. Heard lots about you through Alan and various other connections, etc. But I just want to go back and reflect on something you started off the conversation with today, and that was your words, I can't yet. And I think that is a powerful saying, something that is my golden nugget, my takeaway today. When someone says, I can't, I'm going to put that pause in there for them, and I'm going to then say, yet. And you are a true inspiration of everything you've achieved. The whole story about, the swimming, the rowing, everything that you did in that window. It's just mind blowing. And it just proves that if you put your mind to something and practice and give some time, you can achieve anything that you want to achieve. Thank you, John, from the bottom of my heart for joining us today. I'm going to hand over to Alan to wrap things up and probably just pose the final question before.
Well, just very, very quickly you've heard so much from John, and just remember what he said in the beginning. The challenge was huge because most other people that looked at him said he can't. The school said, the teacher said, he's overcome those challenges. And I love that motto. I can't yet. I think that is a wonderful takeaway for all of you, because you will have been thinking of your life compared to what John has been telling you about. You've got your own challenges. Your challenges are different. You've all got them. We've all got them. I've got them, I think about things that, oh dear, will I be able to do this? Will I be able to do that? I'm going to go away from this meeting with more resolution than I had when I joined it. And I think that if you would like the last word, John, if you have anything further you'd like to add, give us a last sentence to send them all off in a high state of inspiration. That would be great.
One of the things that my father said to me was that he was very tempted when I was very, very little to smother me because he couldn't see how I was going to have a good life. Life is incredibly valuable. Every day we have it is a special day. All I would say is just remember that and go out and live it to the fullest that you can possibly live it.
Well, that's very good. Thank you, John. That reminds me that the great Isaac Newton, who was born an hour away from Cambridge, the nursemaid and the midwife that delivered him said he will not survive until the morning. There's no chance that he will live. And just leave him there. And somebody got hold of him and put him in a warm place, and he survived. He struggled, and he became one of the greatest scientists that ever lived. So John's last words are really, really very powerful. And thank you, John, for sharing in the way that you do. I mean, I knew that you would, because I've known you for many years. And I'm going to go on supporting your business in every way I can. And I hope what comes of this is more action from more people working together to make the world a better place for everyone, especially the next generation. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John. Thank you once again, Alan, for being by my side and hosting this morning's webinar. We are back next month. Lookouts for us. We're back on Monday, the 9th of February from midday UK time. And actually, Alan, we have your...
we have my grandson, Henry, who has just started a company called the Grad Job Club, having given up a well-paid job. He's got his own startup, and he's going to talk about that and his inspiration. He's a young man. He's a graduate in marketing, and he's going to tell you about his journey if you tune in to the next one.
Yeah. Until then, have a lovely day. Enjoy the rest of your week. Once again, John, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.